There is a difference between a man who has lived a long life and a man who has learned from one. The first kind carries the years in his face, in the lines around his eyes, in the way he moves through a room with the particular economy of motion that comes from having done everything twice and knowing now which things require the effort and which things do not. He has opinions. He has seen things. He has made mistakes that taught him something, and some that taught him nothing, and he has, over the course of the accumulation, arrived at a place that is not wisdom exactly, but is adjacent to it. The kind of knowledge that is not available in a book, because it can only be earned. The second kind has the same years but has spent them differently. He has arranged his life to confirm what he already believed when he was 26 years old. Every experience has been processed through the filter of that original belief, shaped to fit it, and stored as evidence. His opinions did not grow from what he learned. They are the same opinions he started with, and the decades have simply made him more certain of them. More comfortable, more protected from the possibility that he was wrong from the beginning, and everything since has been the story a wrong man tells himself to keep from having to start over. The man who sat across from me that morning was the second kind. 74 years old. A face that had earned every line on it. A voice with the kind of depth that accumulates over decades of being listened to. He walked into my studio that morning looking like a man who had learned from his life. He was not. He was a man who had built a very comfortable fortress out of his certainties, and he had arrived on my stage to defend it from the particular threat that Carolyn represented, which was simply the threat of someone who was undeniably excellent at something he had decided, a long time ago, that people like her could not do. I have been a black man in America for 67 years. I know what that particular kind of certainty looks like. I know the face it wears, the reasonable voice, the careful language, the way it always frames itself as observation and never as prejudice, as realism and never as racism, as simply telling the truth that nobody else has the courage to say. I know it the way you know weather, not because someone described it to you, but because you have been standing in it your whole life. What I could not have known, walking onto that stage that morning, was what Carolyn was carrying. What she had already survived to be standing on that stage. And what it was going to mean to her. What it was going to mean to me, when the moment I am about to describe finally arrived. Today I want to tell you 3 things. I want to tell you who Carolyn was. I want to tell you what Theodore Ashworth said and what I said back. Not the clip version, the full version, with everything around it that the clip removed. And I want to tell you what happened in the parking structure 45 minutes after the taping wrapped, because that is the part of this story that I have thought about almost every day since. Subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. Because if you have ever been in a room where someone's certainty was designed to make you doubt yourself, the real version of this story, the one with all the pieces, is something I believe you need to hear. Marcus has been my stage manager for 11 years. There are things Marcus notices that other people do not. He notices the difference between a person who is loud because they are nervous and a person who is loud because they need you to know they are not nervous. He notices the difference between a person who takes up space and a person who is consuming it. He noticed Theodore Ashworth from the moment the man walked through the production entrance. He found me at 10:20 in the morning. He said, the VIP guest in Bay 2. Ashworth, he's 74, retired appellate court judge. His granddaughter is one of today's contestants. He has been here for 50 minutes. In those 50 minutes, he has told our senior producer that the set needs repainting, corrected a PA's grammar twice, and told the contestant coordinator that he has concerns about the integrity of the survey process. She asked him if he had specific concerns. He said, and these are his exact words, "I have general concerns about the category of people who compile these surveys." I said, "The category of people." Marcus said, "That is what he said." I told Marcus security should be aware. Marcus said, "They are aware of everything that has happened in that man's vicinity since he arrived." Then he said, "His granddaughter, her name is Carolyn. She is 29 years old. She works in data science. She has been with us since 8 in the morning and she has not spoken to him once. They arrived separately. She has not looked in his direction since he sat down." I asked Marcus what he thought. Marcus said, "I think she has been not looking at that man for a very long time. And I think she came here today anyway." I nodded. I walked to the stage. Carolyn walked out and the room understood her immediately. Not because she performed for it, she did not. Because she was simply fully herself from the first second, in the specific way that people are fully themselves when they have done a great deal of work to get to that condition and are not going to waste it. 29 years old. Data scientist. She wore a green blazer, and her hair was natural, and she had earrings that caught the light, and she moved to her podium the way a person moves to a place they decided belongs to them before they arrived. Which is different from the way Theodore Ashworth moved through rooms. Because hers came from the inside, and his came from a need to impose it. Her team was her mother, her 2 cousins, and her best friend from graduate school. They came out behind her with the specific energy of people who are genuinely, uncomplicated, thrilled to be somewhere. No performance, just joy. The kind you cannot manufacture, because it requires actually feeling it. Theodore Ashworth sat in the VIP section. He had crossed his arms by the time Carolyn reached her podium. Not hostile. Evaluating. The specific posture of a man who has spent 40 years on a bench deciding things and has not yet found a room where that posture was inappropriate. Carolyn did not look at him. The game began, and from the first question she was extraordinary. Not good. Extraordinary, data science is at its core about finding the pattern underneath the noise. About knowing what the human signal looks like when you strip away everything that is not signal. Carolyn played this game the way she worked, by finding the pattern, by trusting the signal, by knowing that the survey is measuring something real about how people actually think and feel and answer questions when nobody is watching. She hit the buzzer with the confidence of someone who is not guessing. She was knowing. There is a difference. By the second round, the audience was entirely hers, not in the performance way, in the real way. The way a room belongs to someone who is giving it something genuine, and the room knows it and wants to give something back. Her team was feeding off her completely. Her mother in the third position answered a question in round 2 that brought the house down, not because the answer was clever, but because of the way she answered it. The full-body commitment to the answer. The absolute certainty that this was what people would say. Which turned out to be correct. Which turned out to be the number 1 answer. Which turned out to be the moment that made Carolyn grab her mother and hold her the way a daughter holds a mother when the pride is going in both directions at once. Theodore Ashworth in the VIP section was no longer evaluating. He was watching. Something had shifted in him. I noticed it between rounds 2 and 3. He was leaning slightly forward. His arms had uncrossed. He was watching Carolyn the way a man watches something that is not fitting into the category he assigned it. That is when he spoke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Conversationally, to the woman seated beside him, who happened to be Carolyn's aunt. A woman who had spent most of the morning pointedly not speaking to him, he said, at a volume calibrated for a private comment, in a space where no private comment is actually private. She gets it from me. You know. The analytical mind. That is not her mother's side. Carolyn's aunt did not respond. He continued, I always said she had potential, if she applied herself properly. Still nothing from the aunt. He said, and this one was louder, and this one the cameras closest to the VIP section definitely captured. The survey categories are interesting. I wonder if they account for cultural bias. You would think a data scientist would flag that. And then he turned toward the stage and said, at full voice, as though he was offering a contribution to the proceedings, she has my mind. Fortunately, dead silence. Not from the whole studio. The game had just gone to commercial. The audience was in a general murmur. But from the 15 or 20 people in the immediate radius of the VIP section. The silence of people who have heard something and are trying to determine whether they heard correctly and are arriving, one by one, at the conclusion that they did. Carolyn, at her podium, had gone still. Not surprised. The specific stillness of a woman who has heard this voice say things like this for her entire life and has built, around the hearing of it, an entire architecture of stillness. Her posture had not changed. Her face had not changed. But something behind her eyes had gone to a place that was far away and old and very, very tired. Her mother was looking at the floor. Before I tell you what I said, I want you to do one thing. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on the bell. Not for me. For Carolyn. For the 29 years she spent being extraordinary in spite of that voice. Subscribe, then don't move. I was at my host's mark. I had heard it. I had heard all of it. I looked at Marcus in the wing. He looked at me. I looked at Carolyn. She was not looking at her grandfather. She was looking at the scoring board, at the numbers that represented what she had done on this stage through her own intelligence and her own preparation and her own particular, irreducible way of understanding the world. 8 seconds. I know the count. 3 things moved through me. The first was something I need to be precise about, because I have gotten imprecise about it in the past, and the imprecision does not serve the truth. It was not anger. I want to say that clearly. What I felt in the first 2 seconds was not anger. Anger is a hot thing, a forward-moving thing, a thing that wants to find the closest target. What I felt was cold. Cold and clear and very old. The specific cold of a man who has been standing in rooms like this one his whole life and has arrived across 67 years at a complete and total understanding of exactly what he is standing in front of. The cold of recognition without surprise. The cold that is, in its own way, a kind of power. Because you cannot be knocked off balance by something you have been balanced against your entire life. The second thing was my grandmother. Not my mother this time. My grandmother. Sarah Harvey. She lived to 97 years old in Cleveland, Ohio, and she never had more than a 6th grade education, and she was the smartest person I have known in 67 years, including everyone I have met since. She used to say, in the specific language of a woman who had navigated a century of being told what she could and could not be, "Baby, the people who say you got something from them are always the people who need to believe they gave it. Don't correct them. Outlive them. And let what you build do the correcting." I have carried that sentence for 55 years. I have spent 55 years building what she told me to build. And standing on that stage, looking at Carolyn at her podium with her eyes on the scoring board that showed the numbers that proved what she was made of, I knew exactly what the correction looked like. The third thing was Carolyn's mother. Still looking at the floor. The mother of a 29-year-old data scientist who had come to this studio to watch her daughter be brilliant in front of an audience and had heard, instead, the same voice she had been hearing for decades say the same thing it always said. I thought about what it costs a mother to sit in that floor-looking position. What it has already cost her. And I thought about the fact that she was still here, which is its own kind of strength. I made a decision. Not to confront Theodore Ashworth, not to make a scene, not to give the moment the heat it was offering me. I made a different decision. A quieter one. The kind that, in my experience, costs more and lasts longer. I walked to the center of the stage. The commercial break had 30 seconds left. The audience was settling back into their seats. I waited until the room was quiet enough. Then I said, to the room, not to him, not performing for him, simply saying the true thing in the room where it needed to be said. Before we go back to the game, I want to say something. I have been hosting live television for 25 years and I have watched thousands of people play this game. What I am watching today is not luck. It is not inheritance. It is not what somebody gave somebody. What I am watching today is a young woman who built her mind with her own work, her own years, her own particular way of seeing how the world is put together. And the survey agrees. Every time. A pause. I did not look at Theodore Ashworth. I looked at Carolyn. I said, "That is yours. Every bit of it is yours." The room came up. Not explosively, the kind of applause that rises from a room that has understood something and is using the sound to say so. 260 people saying at once, in the language of their hands, "We heard what was said. We know what the correction is. We are making it now." Carolyn looked at me. Her eyes were bright and completely dry. She was not going to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. But she looked at me for 3 seconds with the expression of a woman who has been waiting, without knowing she was waiting, for someone to say the specific thing I just said, in the specific room where it needed to be said, in front of the specific people who needed to hear it. She said, "Thank you." 2 words. I held them. Then, she turned back to the board. And we finished the game. Theodore Ashworth did not speak again during the taping. He sat with his arms recrossed, and his face arranged in the expression of a man who has decided that what just happened was directed at him personally and is processing the indignity. He was right that it was directed at him. He was wrong about what it was. It was not an attack. It was a correction. Delivered not to him, but over him. To the room, to Carolyn, to the truth that needed saying regardless of who had been trying to obscure it. Carolyn's team won. The margin was 53 points. Her mother, in the celebration that followed, did something I want to describe precisely because it matters. She did not cry. She did not scream. She stood up from her seat in the lineup, and she walked to Carolyn, and she took her face in both hands, the specific gesture of a mother who has been waiting for this, who has always known this was coming, who needs to hold the face of the person she was right about, and she said something I could not hear from the stage. Carolyn nodded. Her mother kissed her forehead. That was the whole scene. It lasted 6 seconds. It was the most important 6 seconds of that taping. If you are still with me, share this right now. One person. The person this story is for. You know who they are. The one who has been in rooms where someone kept trying to assign the source of their brilliance to the wrong place. Share it with them. Then stay with me. What the cameras did not catch happened in the parking structure. Marcus found me backstage 20 minutes after the taping wrapped. He said, "Ashworth is in the parking structure. He has been there for 15 minutes. He hasn't gotten in his car. I asked Marcus what he wanted. Marcus said, I don't think he knows. I went. I do not know why, exactly. I think I went because 74 years is a long time to have been wrong about something important, and I wanted to see what that looked like when the performance of certainty was finally off stage. He was standing beside a silver sedan. His driver was in the car. He was not in the car. He was standing beside it with his hands in his pockets, and his jacket still buttoned and his posture still correct. But something had gone out of the posture. The interior was gone. The certainty that had been animating it was somewhere else. What was left was just a 74-year-old man standing in a parking structure who had not gotten in his car yet. He looked up when I walked toward him. He did not say anything. I stopped 6 feet from him. I said, I wanted to check on you. He said, I'm fine. I said, I know. A long pause. The kind that is not uncomfortable exactly. It is the pause of two people who have both said what they needed to say and are standing in the aftermath of it. Then he said, without looking at me, she was always the best student in every room she was in, since she was 6 years old. He stopped. I don't know when I stopped saying that. I did not fill the silence. Some silences are confessions, and the confession requires the whole silence to be heard. He said, I thought I was being realistic. I thought the world was going to tell her things I wanted her to hear from me first. I said, the world told her anyway. She decided not to listen. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I know. I said, she's going to be fine. A pause. Are you going to be fine? He did not answer that. He looked at the car. Then he said, you were right. In there. What you said. He did not look at me when he said it. Men who have spent 40 years on a bench saying the final word on things do not look at you when they admit you said something they could not have said themselves. It's hers. I said, yes. Then I walked back inside. I did not watch him get in the car. That was his business. The parking structure was his business. Whether he made the call he needed to make was his business. What I know is what Marcus told me 2 days later when I asked. He said Carolyn's mother had received a phone call. A short one. She had told Marcus about it because she thought he would want to know, and she was right. The call was 4 minutes long. She did not tell Marcus what was said. She said, he called. That was the thing. He called. That is the full story. Not absolution. Not repair. Not 29 years undone in 4 minutes. Just a 74-year-old man who drove to a parking structure and stood beside his car for 15 minutes, and then drove home and picked up the phone. The smallest possible version of the right thing. And sometimes the smallest possible version is the version that finally gets done. So let me bring you back to where I started. There is a difference between a man who has lived a long life and a man who has learned from one. And the terrifying and the hopeful thing about that difference is that it is never fully settled. A man can be 74 years old and still have a parking structure moment. Still have 4 minutes. Still have the phone. What I know about Carolyn is this. She drove home with $24,000 and a mother who held her face in both hands and a score on the board that said everything that needed to be said. She did not wait for her grandfather's permission to be who she was. She did not build herself from what he gave her. She built herself in spite of what he withheld. And what she built was undeniable. The survey said so. The board said so. 260 people on their feet said so. There is a Theodore Ashworth in your life. Maybe he is 74, and he drives a silver sedan, and he used to be a judge. Maybe he is younger and closer, and inside a relationship you cannot easily leave. Maybe he does not use his voice the way Ashworth used his. Maybe he uses silence, or a look, or the specific way he does not respond when you do something that deserves a response. Whatever form he takes, you know him. You have been not looking at him for years the way Carolyn was not looking. You have been building yourself anyway. Keep building. The board is the answer. The survey is the answer. The moment when 260 people rise to their feet because what you have done in that room is undeniable, that is the answer. You do not need his permission to have it. You never did. And if there is a phone call he has not made, that is his work to do, not yours. You cannot carry that. You have already been carrying enough. Set it down. Let the board say what the board says. Let the room rise when the room rises. Let what you built do the correcting. That is what my grandmother told me. She was right. She was always right. 97 years old and a 6th grade education and the wisest person I have ever known. If this story reached you today, subscribe every week on this channel. There is a story about a person who built something in spite of the voice that tried to tell them they couldn't. About the moment that building became undeniable. This was one of those stories. Share this with one person today. One person who has been building in spite of someone. One person who needs to hear that what they built is theirs. Every bit of it. And no one gets to reassign the source. Share it with them, today. And drop something in the comments. A word. A heart. Tell me about the person who built something extraordinary in spite of the voice. Tell me about the board lighting up. Tell me about the room that rose. I want to hear every single one. God bless Carolyn. God bless her mother and the 6 seconds with both hands. And God bless every person watching this right now who has been building their mind and their life with their own work, their own years, their own particular way of seeing how the world is put together. It is yours. Every bit of it. It has always been yours. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I'll see you in the next one.